step through the door of an elevator and into a nightmare. That door is opening once again, but this time it's opening for you. Long Beach, 2017. Amid the hustle and bustle of the Southern California seaport, Midsummer Scream is a star in its own right, a gathering place for the Halloween elite. Now, something is about to happen that will change all that. Today's presentation is somewhat unique and calls for a different kind of introduction. This is usually recognized as the Terrace Theater, still in operation and waiting for you. We invite you, if you dare, to sit back now and take a deep breath. In today's terror trip, you are the fans, and this theater travels directly to the Twilight Zone.
Former creative director at Walt Disney Imagineering, Eric Jacobson. Tower of Terror show writer, Michael Sprout. Tower of Terror art director and show producer, Cory Sewelson. The voice of Rod Serling, Mark Silverman. And your host for this presentation, Midsummer Scream creative director, Rick West.
All right, let's get this party started. What an awesome group, right? We're just going to have a good time for the next hour talking about one of the greatest attractions ever designed and built. Wouldn't you guys agree? Yeah. So what I would like to do is, we'll go back to the very beginning. And I guess the very beginning is going to start with these two guys here. Eric, maybe you can tell us the genesis of Tower. I mean, how did Tower come about at Disney MGM?
Well, I won't take the entire hour, but we really, Disney management and Imagineering felt that we needed a thrill ride at the Disney MGM Studios. And we didn't want to do something that had been really done before, so we tried to think we didn't want to make another Space Mountain theme to Hollywood or that kind of thing. So we thought, what kind of experience haven't we ever done in our parks? And realized that kind of a drop style attraction is something we haven't done. And then the challenge was to figure out how to fit that into the storyline, fabric, and environment of Disney MGM Studios. So that was really one of the biggest challenges, but obviously it turned out great.
Now, Tower is a big attraction. It takes up a big footprint. Was it always designed to be the weenie at the end of Sunset, or how did that evolve?
Well, I think in the beginning, it was going to be much closer to the hub area of the center of the park, and we realized how tall it needed to be for the experience we wanted to have. We think, said for perspective reasons, we pushed back. So that was really a challenge for the team to convince management to spend the money to build Sunset Boulevard to go up to where the tower was today. But I think after it was done, everybody agreed it was the right decision. It's much more spectacular to see it at the end of that street, and it creates an entirely new kind of land area for it. Sure.
And this was fairly new after Team Disney kind of hit their stride, bringing in a lot of expansion within the company.
Right.
What were Michael Eisner and Frank Wells, were they strong proponents of this?
Michael Eisner for sure was. He loved it from the beginning. He really wanted to do it. So yeah, they were strong. It didn't take a lot of convincing to do the Tower of Terror. It took more convincing, as I said, to do the land leading up to it and get that extra infrastructure approved.
Sure. And so when you decide that you're going to do the Tower of Terror, at what point then is the show writer brought onto this?
Well, I think the writer was part of the team from the beginning. We were a big group, as many people as fit in a room, and the writer was just the guy who writes it down. but it's really a team effort to come up with the concept. And once we decided it was going to be a building, we had a whole bunch of different thoughts. Is it an insane movie director? That was one idea. Is it Stephen King and Mel Brooks?
Yeah, that's one of the, that you hear that come up a lot now in the day of podcasts and that type of thing. You hear people say that, and I had never heard that before. So there was something to that.
It doesn't get very far. I mean, it's cards on a wall very often, you know. But when we decided about Twilight Zone, that just seemed like a natural property. Michael Eisner was not convinced. Apparently, he didn't watch as much TV. But we convinced him.
That's great. And so how was it a challenge back then to bring Twilight Zone on SIP? You had to go through the family, or how did that process kind of work?
You know, that was handled by the studio, a lawyer's attorney, so we weren't really part of that process, but it took some negotiations, unfortunately. But it wasn't impossible, obviously.
Michael, do you remember how long into the project it was before you landed on it's going to be Halloween, it's going to be the setting and the time period and all that?
I think it's about an hour and a half. No, I have no idea when that happened. But it sort of built up, you know. We picked 1939 specifically because this is a movie park, and 1939 was a great year for movies. Like when it was Wizard of Oz, it was Gone with the Wind, there was a whole bunch of, so that was, you know, okay, that's a good time. And it's golden age Hollywood. We just sort of went on from there. And then Halloween seemed like a pretty natural time to
I think we're okay with Halloween being the focal point. So then, also as it progresses, you get a lot of art going on with it. And then Cory, you're brought on, right, as art direction for this?
Yeah, I was actually the second production designer, art director. I think it was David Arthur.
Yes.
And I don't know why he left, because it was such a great attraction, but when I came on, the project was just about to go into production, and we also were behind in coming up with what the fifth dimension should be. And I remember there was an outside special effects company that had tried to do a heavy fog kind of mock-up, so I was gifted with a shoebox full of neat fog nozzles, no notes, and we had like total panic to get the fifth dimension done. So we brought in Gerard Howland, who was the opera artistic director in San Francisco, and we were going into production and designing the fifth dimension all at the same time. It was a lot of fun.
That's really, really cool. And so, I'm a show writer. By day, I'm a show writer, so I know that every project is a little bit different. But when you finalize your script, how far along are you in the process as far as artwork and then figuring out who's going to do, and we're going to get to you, Mark. I know they want to hear from you. We're going to find out about how the voice came about. But how far along are you in your final script before everything starts really going?
You know, the final script happens after the attraction opens. I mean, that's a joke, right? Final script, we put it on the script, but we never mean that. It changes. In fact, once we record it, even after we recorded Mark, we have to write it and make sure it fits, because there's ride timing that we have to live with. For instance, the video that you see in the library, it had to be 88 seconds long, and no more or less. So our director, Joe Dante, he thought he was going to make a movie. And we had to say, no, it's an 88-second movie. That was tough for him to live with. He said, no, it's going to be great, I love it. I said, it doesn't matter what it is, it's going to be 88 seconds.
So, the story is set, everything, all the wheels are turning, everything's set in motion. At what point does Mark Silverman get the call that they're looking for people to do Rod Serling voices?
Oh, me?
Well, why not you? I think you were there.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, I had already been a voice actor for a while. I was working at K-Rock Radio doing weird prank phone calls to celebrities, and I started getting a lot of jobs revoicing celebrities.
And I was doing a few things here and there. And then I got a phone call from a friend of mine, another voice actor, and he said his agent said they were looking for a Rod Serling voice for a Disney World ride. And I remember thinking, how do you connect Rod Serling and Disney World? It was crazy, you know. So I ran down to this audition, and I read it to some, it was some agent's first day on the job, and I read it into some tape recorders, like a big ghetto blaster from Radio Shack. And, you know, I read the thing, and I didn't really think much of it, because there's so many people involved. And then 2 weeks later, she called me, this agent woman, and said, "Hi, Mark, I want you down at Disney Imagineering for the Rod Serling thing again." I said, "Wow, really?" And I was such a Disney nut back then that just getting into Imagineering and walking around was the most exciting thing. Because I wasn't even thinking about getting the job. So after a few more auditions, they kept telling me that I was right at the top of the list. And then there was one final audition at Imagineering, me and some other guy. And I went into some big sound stage and read it for Joe Dante and a few of his assistants. And they came out and told me I got it. And that was that.
I'm thinking at this point you guys kind of want to hear what he read, right? Take a drink and then unleash the beast. We want to hear this.
All right, what was it again?
Twilight Zone. Twilight Zone.
Hollywood, 1939. Amid the glitz and the glitter of a bustling young movie town at the height of its golden age, the Hollywood Tower Hotel was a star in its own right, a beacon for the show business elite. Now, something is about to happen that'll change all that. The time is now. What's the next one? The time is now. On an evening very much like the one you've just witnessed. Tonight's story of the Twilight Zone is somewhat unique and calls for a different kind of an induction. This, as you may recognize, is a maintenance service elevator still in operation waiting for you. We invite you, if you dare, to step aboard because in tonight's episode, you are the star. And this elevator travels directly to the Twilight Zone.
That's about as geeky awesome as it gets, right, guys? So, Rod Serling's widow had a hand in choosing you, did you not?
Yeah, that was great because I was a Twilight Zone nut too. It was like two of my biggest obsessions as a kid. Twilight Zone and Disneyland became some weird reality for me. It was like my own weird Twilight Zone.
Well, I think the world's a better place for it because it was amazing what you guys did, right? So let's go into.
This sort of came to the opening of the ride, and I was, one of her escorts that day, and I said, "Do you want to go on the ride?" She goes, "Sure." And a couple other people wrote, said, "Oh, I'm not going to do that. It sounds too scary." She goes, "Oh, come on, don't be chicken. Let's go." So she was a great sport. She loved it. She loved it. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, let's talk about after we do the recording and everything is set in motion. Let's talk about the construction of Tower. And were there any challenges along the way of getting this thing in, or anything that was unexpected that you guys ran into, or was it fairly smooth?
Well, I can start off by saying I think one of the things I did fail to mention before is one of the challenges when we think about what this ride system wanted to be and how big the building needed to be. We need to figure out what would the story of that building be. And so we looked around Hollywood and thought, what is a really tall structure that would fit in the time period? And we looked at the Chateau Marmont and some other Mission Inn, Riverside, and other buildings in that area and said, a hotel makes the most sense for a building of that size. And that's really how that sort of came before deciding what the actual story inside it was. Because you can see from these pictures that you have that it's a massive structure. There's a lot to go in it just to accommodate the systems that present the show and then take care of the ride. So from there it was a challenge of how to fit the skin and keep it thematically beautiful and storytelling, and yet accommodate all something different. So maybe Cory, maybe you could talk a little bit more about that.
This is definitely one of the, I worked on a lot of projects. I've probably worked there 30 years And this is the hardest attraction to build, absolutely. In every possible way you can imagine. I mean, the construction of it it's just under 200 feet tall, because if it was 1 foot taller than it is, it would have to have a red light on it. So I mean, keeping within those kinds of parameters. And the physical construction of just having to climb up, we call it the Stairmaster, because we had to climb up and down all day so many times. Yeah, everything was a challenge. The outside is so thematically intense with the trades that have to come together to create the really authentic decaying plaster and those sorts of tricks, and the amount of surface to cover. I think the paint fleet had to drive down to Kissimmee, which is, like 20 miles away, and use binoculars to take the whole thing in and give radio instructions to the painters. I mean, everything was just way harder than anything else I've ever worked on. And yeah, but that made it a lot of fun. And the ride system too was probably the bigger challenge. The biggest elevators Otis has ever made, powering this thing, and someone didn't quite understand the ride control demands, how much it had to be digitally accurate in every stop. And we literally, the power panels in the engine control room, the elevator control room, blew off the wall, and I think we were almost 6 months away. It was barely finished in time. So yeah, everything was really difficult. And of course, we all beat that up, so it made it more comfortable.
What was really interesting about this is it was built in an era that it's kind of hard to imagine now, but it was built in an era where there wasn't really any social media. There weren't people, there weren't Disney World fans taking pictures and tweeting, the construction and all that. And so I know, just staring through the pipeline back in the day, that there were tourists arriving at Walt Disney World and driving around trying to figure out where they could check into this hotel. And that was a thing back then.
Which was awesome, because at one point there was even an idea to see if there could be a real hotel and a thrill ride in one building, which we couldn't imagine how that would work.
I remember there was a drawing of the elevator used to fall through the bar.
It doesn't stop at the bar.
Right past.
Oh, hell no. No, it's not.
So,
Michael Eisner loved that idea.
He loved it.
He was really good on doing a hotel base, a real hotel base for us. And he had all kinds of, I can't remember anymore, but gags that would happen in the room and all these special effects and all that kind of stuff. And at some point somebody said, the problem is that to have a room that's that detailed, that elaborate, you have to charge so much, and the people that can afford that room wouldn't want to stay in a room like that. They would want to stay at the Grand Floridian. So they kind of just sort of...
I think they would want to stay there.
They would stay there. But I couldn't afford it.
and before it was a ride, the idea was it was a walkthrough, a Twilight Zone walkthrough, and there was dozens and dozens of storyboards about that.
That's interesting. Cory, did you work on those storyboards for that at that point?
Well, we had David Duran, and I think he had literally a 5 foot or taller pile of storyboards at the end of the project, because every time there was a slight change or suggestion, he did a new panel for it. I've never seen anybody draw like that. He's an unbelievably great artist.
I responded to something in the building in the script when Michael Eisner, he was imagining the building and the ride, and he said, well, I want to see the people falling in the elevator. So, okay, we have to put a hole in the building. Why is there a hole in the building? And that impacted the story. We had to respond to that. Okay, so it's lightning and all that stuff, and it dissolved away. So it was an afterthought, it was an adjustment to the building itself.
Sure. And I think it's great. What a cool common thread is, I think you're saying that it started as a walkthrough attraction. I think that arguably some of the best attractions in the world, Haunted Mansion, Pirates of the Caribbean, Tower of Terror, all started as walkthrough attractions, right? It's hard to imagine that way now.
Yeah, I want to mention something else about these photographs we have. Think about the challenge to the building, just the ride system having the double ton of drop and then fifth dimensions, all that kind of stuff, made it really, really massively wide. And we looked at the model, we said it just looks too big, so we turned the whole thing, as you can see in these pictures, do like 3/4 of a three-quarter view, sort of like a Super Bowl turning at the best angle. So it's
well, it is super sexy.
It's slimmed it down to make it sexier, exactly.
Yeah, it really is great. You know, we're talking about this project moving forward into construction phase, and everything's getting pretty far along at this point. I would be remiss not to bring up the fact that we lost Marty Sklar. So, does anybody did you have any direct dealings with, or any funny stories, or anything about Marty coming to visit the tower while you guys were working on it? I heard you didn't like the drop, was it?
Well, the only thing I'm remembering right now is our show producer, Lane Akeyama.
Yeah.
She didn't like going on the rides, and opening day, Marty grabbed her and pulled her under the, he says, if I'm going, you're going. So they both rode.
There you go.
And I think that's the only time she ever rode.
Yeah, no, Marty was a great champion of everything that we worked on. I worked with him for almost probably 35 years. So, and he loved Imagineering. He loved his mentees, as I guess would be called. So he was very enthusiastic about this and really wanted it to happen. So, and I don't have any funny stories.
Well, that's okay. I have something funny. I want Cory to explain what the hell that is.
That's Cory on the left.
Yeah, I have the smaller of the shoes in that photo. Yeah, I thought I'd throw that in because actually the backstory of choosing this was Tower, unlike almost every other attraction again, seemed to bring out a growing list of the team's fears, personal fears, right? So the obvious, fear of the dark, fear of heights, fear of elevators, the show producers fear to ride it, so we just became more and more aware of everyone's, personal list of what they're terrified. So often, we did these interviews, in this case it was Bozo visiting Walt Disney World, and they let him, talk to us. And, he wanted, someone to explain the ride when it's not there to actually go on. It was rather difficult. But, so anyway, this project manager that I usually did them with, these interviews and cameras, so it was no big deal. And she was always fine with it. And then for some reason, she just was not able to go out there with him. And it turned out she actually had a fear of clowns. So I'm not mentioning names because I sympathize with any of that as being real. So it was just odd. It was the weirdest thing.
That is weird. Yeah, that is really weird. So it opens in Florida, and it's an amazing, amazing opening. And I remember the first time I actually went to Walt Disney World. The tower was fairly new. And again, there was no social media, so you kind of knew what it was about, but you didn't. There were no spoilers to be seen online or anything like that. There wasn't even on the internet. I mean, it was infinite back then, right? So I remember going on the first time and just going through the gardens. I mean, the queue areas, went through the gardens, and the cracked fountain, the broken fountain with the hardware still in it. And then you make that turn into the grand lobby, and it's just staggering. It really is. It's so beautiful. You guys did such a beautiful job, designing that aspect of it. And then getting on the ride itself, and you know that it's a drop ride because you can see people and hear the scream. And I'm telling you, you're in there white knuckled because the lights go out and Mark's spooky ass voice comes on. And you're just waiting for it, you're sucking up half the seat, and you're waiting, and then it moves out into the fifth dimension, which was mind blowing. I mean, now trackless ride systems are fairly common, but back then that was mind melting at that point. And you forgot for a few seconds that you're moving through the fifth dimension. Oh shit, there's a drop coming up at the end, and it was really beautiful the way that was. Were there specific challenges getting that elevator, that ride vehicle from the first shaft to the drop tower through the fifth dimension?
Yeah, the attraction is 3 ride systems. There's a simple elevator system that takes you up, we call the lip side, and then the drop elevator with the big driving elevators that make you go really fast. And then connecting them is this AGV, automated guided vehicle, whatever that stands for. And that was a new technology, and it had its difficulties, getting it fine-tuned. And I mean, that was actually my most terrifying ride. Was the first time we rode from the lift side to the drop side, and I was in there with all the ride team, and they were arguing about whether we'd done that check to make sure the elevator cab on the big drop was actually guaranteed to be there. So when the doors open and it's in the dark, everybody had their flashlights out, like trying to see if it was really there.
That first drop is a doozy, right?
I have to say, every time I went on the ride, and I've been on it hundreds of times, I worried about that very thing. But it was, Disney is not going to let something like that happen. So it was a baseless fear. But you still, like Cory said, what if that platform was there to catch you and you just went down?
The attraction is kind of, if you think about the sequence, especially the one in Florida, it is all about doors. So we wanted to, every time you were up against some pair of doors, you wouldn't know what the move would be. So it starts in the lobby going into the library with the automatic doors opening out, and then the surprise of hopefully surprise of the sliding secret panel, and then the more expected elevator doors, and then when you go to the fifth dimension, you're likely not expecting that the whole vehicle is moving out through the doors. So yeah, we were trying to build up suspense and surprise through the way the attraction is choreographed.
And Mark, when they're describing this attraction to you, I mean, you gotta, when you're in a sound booth and you're making this recording, you gotta be wondering what the hell is this, what's going on with this project. Did they explain it to you? And then how was that when the first time you wrote it, actually hearing that and experiencing it all at once?
Well, they did explain it to me, but I never got the scope, the magnitude of it, It wasn't until Regis went on the Walt Disney World Christmas parade, there was some kind of little bit with Regis on it. And when I looked at that, I thought, wow, this thing is huge, So when they set me out there for the grand opening, it still was beyond my wildest imagination. I had no idea this thing was going to be that massive, And finally, to get to hear my own voice on this Disney attraction was so oddly satisfying and peculiar. Because I was so obsessed with Disneyland as a kid, I would go in with my tape recorder, and my pockets were stuffed with blank cassettes, and I would record every ride, every sound, and I had them all in boxes, all these cassettes. And there I was, opening night, with that same tape recorder, and recording my own voice. So it was really crazy. But the ride, it was better than I even could have possibly imagined. And I think I went on it about 5 times that night. And I wanted to go on with Rod Serling, but she just got off right when I went on. But that was such an event. And they gave us free Cobb salad that night from the restaurant.
It's easier to clean up.
But yeah, that was good. It was terrific. And then I went back to the All-Star Sports that night and slept very well.
Well, I think that anybody that's been on the Florida Virgin knows, when you move to the fifth dimension, when that celestial door just appears and opens in the darkness, it doesn't matter if you've been on it, 100 times or it's your first time, your heart kind of does a little dance in your chest.
Oh, I can recreate that.
You are about to discover what lies beyond the fifth dimension, beyond the deepest, darkest corner of the imagination, in the Tower of Terror.
And then the Cobb salad comes out. So Tower is a hit in Orlando, and so there's the team, there's the construction team there. You guys must have felt like proud papas when it opened, yeah? What were your feelings? What were your feelings on opening night or day or whenever you had your big moment?
Well, I'll just say overall, I think it was one of the, if not one of the biggest highlights of my career, because we had a great team. It was something completely, not the Twilight Zone part, but the attraction itself was something completely unique. It wasn't a variation of another, on-the-move ride or a different theming of something that was brand new. And again, the team was spectacular. So it was that we knew we created something that was going to be memorable and would live on and on and on. So it was a great experience.
I felt the same way. Imagine at some point I'm just in a room typing on a computer, and a couple of years, many years later, there's this actual building, and like Mark, I had no idea what it was going to look like and how big it was going to be and how complicated it was. So it was a real, major thrill, major.
And it's got to be amazing for you, because as a show writer, you go into this profession knowing that like 98% of the stuff that you write never will see the light of day. So when something does pop and it's this, it doesn't get better than that.
So opening day, they bring in a lot of press, radio and television, and the writer is even asked to talk on some of these things. So I'm talking to this radio guy, I don't know where he was from, and he'd been talking to Cory and Eric and, important people. And then he said, well, what do you do on the attraction? I said, well, I was the writer. He just said, well, that's a ride, there's nothing to write. And I said, well, I wrote the name on the building. There's a lack of understanding that there was any writing involved. It's pretty complete.
It is pretty amazing, but you guys, we are so lucky because there was a blank piece of paper, and then there was One Stormy Night Long Ago. And the show writer right here with us. It's so cool. I love that. I'm thrilled as a writer to have you here with us.
I'd just like to say that at one point we had 2 writers, and we wore the other one out. And Kevin Rafferty was still at Imaginary. In the early days when we were brainstorming, Kevin was on the team, and then he left to do something else, and I stayed with the rest of the time.
Cory, how about you at opening?
Well, at the end of when you complete an attraction and it works and the expectations are exceeded, and yeah, you get this incredible sense of pride. And when the team gets along so well and you just like everyone, and everyone on this project was able to, everything came together in terms of, there was enough money to do all the details right, and everyone was really proud of the work and how they were able to get so much into it. I mean, it just is way beyond even the usual pride you feel at the completion of a project.
So that is the legacy on the East Coast. And then about 10 years later, its sister attraction opened just up the road here in Anaheim. And let's talk a little bit about what it took to bring Tower to California Adventure.
Yeah, I was the producer this time and creative director, and the mission was, no pun intended, the mission was to recreate exactly what's in Florida, but there was some magic percentage of the budget available and some other requirements. The height was an issue too, the footprint had to be smaller. There was a lot of difficulties in translating an exact lift when you can't really do an exact lift. So the other thing that got identified from Florida was that HEB, that horizontal transfer system, was the cause of most of the downtime in the attraction. So there was a lot of pressure to just, let's not do that. Placement that put you specifically as a guest into the show, and that's why the doors open and there's a big mirror, and then we do this special effect as if you, the guest, now are being transformed into a ghost. So you saw the ghosts in the pre-show, you see them now as you're part of the story that we're telling in the Twilight Zone ride, and goes on from there to be fairly familiar.
So we have this thermal image of the guests, and we realize they're not going to know who they are. They're not going to recognize themselves. So that changed the script. So we have them wave. We tell them to wave their hands. So now they can see that, oh, that's me. I'm doing it. So that's the reason we asked them to do that.
Go ahead, Mark. What does it say at that point?
Wave goodbye to the real world, for you have just entered the Twilight Zone.
So you do get called back in. They say, we're going to do this thing in California. It's different. It's got different scenes. We need you to come back and record. I'm sure that they really had to twist your arm for that, right?
Yeah, right, yeah. Yeah, I went in, but the pre-show was the same. But all the other stuff was all new.
And you were in Florida. You were the Florida executive, right?
Sorry, excuse me, I only worked in the original character.
Right, okay. So now they're starting to drop off. And then it's Michael doing these little adjustments. Cory's moving up and moving on in those positions. Mark's getting callbacks to record things. And then it goes international. And we have the tower opens in Paris as well as Tokyo Disney Sea. And Cory, you were on for Paris, right? And were you on for Tokyo also? No, it ends there. So let's talk about bringing it over to Paris.
Again, the idea was to recreate this time California's Tower of Terror. The French folks have familiarity with the Twilight Zone. I think it aired like maybe half the number of episodes that we had here. So they were familiar with Rod Serling and the sense of supernatural that is the whole crux of the attraction. Seemed to make sense of the way we were telling that story. They were fine with it. I'm not the expert to explain Japan, but I'm familiar enough to know they didn't respond to the...
They didn't, it hadn't been shown there once, but they didn't remember, basically.
That's fundamentally why it changed.
And they respond differently to ghosts and spirits there too, right? It's a different type of...
I don't think that was part of it, but there are different ghosts in Japan. But it's basically, they don't have a big feeling about Rod Serling and the Twilight Zone and that music. The music, was a real key in other places.
Yeah, absolutely. It's part of our Thanksgiving here in America, right? But the tower is beautiful, all over the world. And Tokyo obviously is very different than any of the other versions. I've never been on it. Have you guys been on the Tokyo version?
Yes, I have. It's really great. It's a different experience. It's the same kind of visceral experience, but story-wise it's completely different. It also takes place in the American waterfront land area of the park, and it has nothing to do with Hollywood. So it really felt like that. I think even if the Twilight Zone was popular, it probably would have been a harder fit to put it where it was going in the park. So yeah.
I was the writer on that as well. So we as Eric said, we had to fit into 1901, American waterfront. So this hotel got a lot more eccentric and lavish, as you can see. And we invented this guy, Harrison Hightower. It's the Hightower Hotel. And he's this kind of wacky guy who collects things. And there's a little bit, on the underhanded side of things. So he runs afoul of this sort of voodoo fetish doll that causes. Now we have a reason for the attraction, a real instigator for what's going on, rather than just something mysterious. There's an actual villain in this one, this little nasty little doll.
And it's great. I mean, now that we do have social media and the internet and all that, I mean, I've seen it. It's a great, what you can't see. It's a great attraction.
I was disappointed because I was spending so much time with my tape recorder practicing Rod Serling in Japanese. And then I was disappointed.
We tried.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So, Mark, you do this at the drop of a dime, and the Disney parks. Some people have heard you other places than the Disney parks.
Do you know what's weird? It's impossible for me now to ride any elevator and not get into it. And the best one was, I was up at Target where they have this elevator, and I get in with all these women in these strollers, and I said, oh, just do it. And the elevator doors closed. I went, you were the passengers in the And some people looked at me like I was nuts. Some people wouldn't even look, But it's difficult for me to get into an elevator and not do that.
As we head into the home stretch here, looking back at the legacy of Tower, it's such a stunning accomplishment, really. I mean, I think it's a cornerstone of the Disney parks. When you reflect on things, when you go to it, when you go to Florida and see it, in a way it's a lifetime ago, but it's also got to be, oh man, I remember that. And can you kind of reflect just on how you feel when you see the Tower?
Well, I could speak before. I mean, I've been on some of the other ones too, but I think, and this is true of a lot of attractions, and it's kind of something that, I don't know if we inherited from Walt or just heard Walt doing, but is waiting at the exit of the attraction and seeing people coming out giggling and screaming and let's do it again, and all that kind of stuff. And it just, so that was worth every ounce of sweat and pain and sleepless nights to get done because everybody is so excited when they get off that attraction. And that means you design a winner, in my book anyway.
I don't think we talked about it. Just how long? But from green light to open day for Florida, what timeline are we talking about on Tower?
Well, I don't know, but I mean, before green light, there was a lot of time too. There's a lot of concepts there.
The park opened in 1989, and it was a big hit already, but there was enough to do. So it was we probably worked on it for a year in design, and then 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, I think I was at least 3 years.
It opened in 1994, so 4 or 5 years after the park, after the park opened. So it was somewhere in the 5-year zone, something like that.
Wasn't Tower was part of there was like a horror neighborhood for studio at one time when we had like Creature's Choice. And
I think that was later.
was that later?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's another pile of discarded ideas that was equally tall. Before
We want to hear a little bit about a horror neighborhood, don't we?
There was going to be I was going to say, when you're working on something for 3 years, after a while you figure it's not going to get built. Because you work on a lot of things that don't. And that was what this was. I wrote a show called The Mystery Writer Theater that uses the technology of the Pepper's Ghost effect with a writer and his characters appearing around it. And we totally scripted and designed that whole show. We worked on that for 2 or 3 years and we just went away. But there was also the Creature's Choice Award show. Can you talk about that?
No.
Mark, can you talk about it?
It was a theater-based animatronics and special effects intensive show that honored movie monster, the best of movie monsters and moments in an award show parody. So that didn't go beyond blue sky. But boy, was that fun. Actually, Cassandra Peterson came in for a meeting. We wanted to use her Elvira character as part of that. It was great fun.
Yeah, I think what's really exciting about the Tower of Terror, on the Twilight Zone.
Yeah.
The Twilight Zone really is about supernatural, not haunted things, and it felt like the neighborhood started falling apart. It was really focused on celebrating the brand of the Twilight Zone and make that, as strong as possible. So, and we want to make, rather than have 3 okay things, make one awesome, amazing thing, and that's what we set out to do.
I think they accomplished that. What do you guys think? I did want to do one thing. Can I have the house lights up just a little bit?
Oh, there's people here.
There are people here. There are a lot of people here. Hi, everybody. I wanted to do this. We talked about, the experience that you have as a team, bringing us together, and the experience of waiting at the exit, hearing people come out and laughing and talking about it. If you have been on Tower of Terror in Tokyo, can you stand up? If you have been on Tower of Terror in Paris, can you stand up? If you have been on Tower of Terror in Orlando, can you stand up? And if you have been on Tower of Terror in California, can you stand up? Look at all the people that you guys affected and touched. This is your audience here.
We failed.
Where have you been? They've been in the line without a backpack. They're still waiting to get on it. I want to thank you guys so much for being here today to kick off Midsummer Scream. We have a history of starting our shows and our conventions with spooky-ish attractions, and for years we beat the Haunted Mansion to death, and in a lot of ways, Tower, I think, is on a parallel trajectory as Haunted Mansion. It really is paranormal, it's spooky, The detailing is second to none on the attraction, and it really has a legacy that lasts generation after generation, and has been made around the world in different iterations, maybe, and maybe here in Anaheim in a different iteration. But the idea is there, and to create something that is just so endearing and has forever become part of our cultural DNA, especially as theme park fans and haunt fans and horror fans or whatever. Thank you. Thank you so much to you guys. I can say that Mr. Mark Silverman, being the shy guy he is going to be more than happy to meet any of you guys out in the lobby if you want to take pictures and talk to him and all that. I'm sure that disappoints you guys, right? So after the show, we'll have Mark out in the lobby to say hi to you guys. Anybody have any closing thoughts before we wrap this chapter up?
A warm welcome back to those of you who have and a friendly word of warning, something you won't find in any guidebook. The next time you check in with a deserted hotel in the dark side of Hollywood, make sure you know just what kind of vacancy you're filling, or you may find yourself a permanent resident of the Twilight Zone.
I think that's it, right? I think we've reached the lobby level of our elevator ride. You guys, thank you so much for coming out. See ya.